Hello, folks. I'm Ed Overstreet back with you. Yeah, really for the second night in a row. And this is kind of a follow up on my last video when I was working on some data sent to me from a member of our astronomy club. And uh, what occurred to me was the programs that we can use that uh, are available to us that can help us get the most out of our imaging nights. And so, what I wanted to do was to readdress how to best manage noise and hot pixels so that we do get the best that we possibly can get uh, when we spend the number of hours we spend trying to catch signal and then make a picture out of it. So you spend 5, 6, 7 hours one night, and you add another 5, 6 hours the next night, and the next perhaps, in order to get and build on data to get enough signal to really make a beautiful, colorful, intriguing image of deep space target. And how do you get the best you possibly can get given our software? So what I thought I would do, and I'm going to, I am not a YouTuber. I'm making videos, but I don't script anything. I kind of land on my feet, and I don't like to watch them after I've done them because I catch myself saying flats when I meant lights or lights when I meant flats. And most people will go back and edit it and they'll put a oops, I meant flats. And I'm too lazy to do that. So I'm going to ramble through this one. These are just thoughts that I have running through my head that I want to address. Now, I did do a little organization, which is unusual for me. And so let's get started. And I think as this plays out, you'll see what I'm talking about. Hope so. If not, we're all wasting time. Okay, we are now in Photoshop, and the two things that I know I am going to want to talk about tonight. One is dithering, and how to set up dithering. I can share the settings that I use and why, and then cosmetic correction, and the cosmetic correction process that I use. It comes from software in PixInsight, or the software program called PixInsight. Unfortunately, if you don't have PixInsight, I would not know how to help you. So this is really for PixInsight users and people who use PhD2 and a acquisition software program like Sequence Generator Pro or Backyard EOS for Canon or Backyard EOS for Nikon or Astrophotography Tool, Nina. All of these have the capability of setting up a dither routine. And I think they're pretty similar. They should be. It should be at any rate. So I'll go through my settings and why I use what I use, and the same thing with cosmetic correction. But I want to focus on dithering right now and try to explain why dithering is so critical in order to manage the noise that long exposure photography creates. So I created a template in Photoshop, and we have let me get the stars back here real bright. Change the opacity, and there we go. So I've got these really bright stars, and that's my target. And so let's suppose I was imaging, and these stars really were the subject of my imaging session. And I'm going to lower the opacity so that you can still see the stars, but I want to reveal the noise in the background. So I'm going to kind of bring the opacity down some so that you see them. You're going to have to be able to see them to understand this concept. Make them a little brighter. But I want you to see the noise as well. And I'm going to kind of zoom in a little bit. So the noise that you see in this background is fixed pattern noise. It's a fixed pattern that is throughout the sensor, and it has to do with any number of things that takes place when electrons or photons are striking your sensor and being converted into electrons that are going into an image. So you have heat that builds up, and so you have some thermal noise, and you have the electronic signal of your camera that plays a role. But at any rate, there is this fixed pattern noise, and it's in your image, and it can be aggravating. Now, we do have some extremely sophisticated and functional noise reduction programs in software like PixInsight and other software. I'm not familiar too much with other software, but of course Photoshop's got some great noise reduction softwares. Nix software has some, Topaz has some, and the artificial intelligence, the AI programs with Topaz are very sophisticated, and they work very well. But the more you apply noise reduction, you start jeopardizing really the authenticity of your image. Not that I'm a purist by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't want to go into that plastic look. And it's a delicate decision to add just a little more noise reduction, because at some point in time you pass over that can't go back line where your image now looks kind of plastic-like. Your stars are perfect, they're look like round little plastic saucers. So at any rate, I want to apply noise reduction. I have no problem with it. I think it's extremely important, but I like it in moderation. I would much rather manage as much of the noise as I can, not using it. So here's what I want you to see. I'm going to go up here to the left, and I'm going to grab the Move tool. And I'm going to select this layer that has the stars on it so I can move the stars. So I'm moving the stars back and forth. All right. Now, what I want you to imagine is that the move that I'm causing is the mount dithering. The mount is given a signal by Sequence Generator Pro to move 1 pixel, and PhD tells it how to do it, whether it's going to be in a spiral or it's going to be in a random fashion. So it's going to move a pixel this way or this way or this way, but it's going to move the camera between shots a pixel in any one number of directions, just depending on what you choose in PhD2. And of course, if you're using Sequence Generator Pro, then you coordinate the dithering and control the dithering from Sequence Generator Pro, but you also use the approach to dithering, whether it's spiral or circular, in PhD2, and I'm going to show you how you do that. But if you notice that I'm dithering by just moving this around, and that is between shots, and what I want you to notice is the noise. The noise isn't moving. It's a fixed pattern that's on your sensor. It's not moving. What's moving are the stars. And so what's happening in post-processing after a dithered image has been brought in is that the software says, hey, we can stack those stars. So they're one on top of the other, even though they dithered throughout the night. And also we notice that a lot of stuff in your image isn't moving. So that cannot be signal. That has to be something else, and that something else must be bad. So let's subtract it. If it's not moving, then it's got to be something that's foreign. And it's got to be something that's not part of the night sky image, whether it's stars or nebula. It's got to be noise or electronic signature that's passed through and wasn't wasn't calibrated out. So that's why you dither. You dither to move your camera. The mount does it. It gets instructions from Sequence Generator Pro on when to dither, on how much to dither, and how long to wait after you've dithered for the mount and everything to settle down. And it does take a little time between images that you have to factor into your imaging session that night, but it's worth it. So dither or die, and that's my mantra for today. Now let's go back to, or not back, let's go into my software. This is Sequence Generator Pro, and this is PhD to my guiding software. So what I want to do is I want to open up the brain down here under at the bottom of PhD 2, and it's the advanced settings. I'm going to click on this. You want to be in the global mode, and I'm going to come down to Dither Settings. And for me, I'm only going to dither in RA. It's only important that you move the camera. It's not important that you move it in RA and DEC. It's only important that you move it. So why move the camera in declination if you have declination backlash like I do? And I got a lot of it. And I got a lot of it with 3 different mounts that I use for imaging on any given night. They're all up at the same time, and I image all 3 sometimes at the same time. I always image 2 at the same time, and they all have declination backlash. So I'm only going to dither in RA. And down here, during the dithering, you'll see at the top, after a dither, you'll have written out dither right across the top of your graph. And in blue, that's the RA lines in blue. That's how I have it set up. You can set up the colors any way you want, but DEC is in red and RA is in blue. You'll see a spike where it dithered a pixel or 2. Now, if you want to see just how much it is dithering, you can change the settings. Let me close this out. One other thing while we're here. The scale is set at 1 by default. Leave it there. It matters not whether you have a random dither where it just decides on a whim really which way it's going to go, or that it moves circular in a spiral, always coming back to the same place. Now, I think you run a risk if you're doing randomly to just move in one direction for too long. And you may have to do some unnecessary cropping because stacking artifacts are the result. So you may want to stay with a spiral. It doesn't matter. I have picked random, and I don't find the stacking artifacts to be any different than if I pick spiral. I'm just wondering, and it's just wondering out loud, and I may be all wet, that it might create some trailing that creates even more stacking artifacts if you're going random, because you really don't know which way it's going to go, and it may go in one direction for far too long. So whatever you pick, spiral random, test it, and if you feel like you're giving up too much edge to stacking artifacts, change it and see how that works for you. So that's all you do into coordinating your dithering with your acquisition software. And we're going to shut that down. And I mentioned if you want to see how much you're going to dither, you can go to settings and you can change from arc seconds. This is measuring arc second fluctuations in the movement of your star. And you can change that to pixels, and then 1 pixel, 2 pixel, 3 pixel, and you can tell how much the amount is dithering by how the spike is affected by the dither, and it tells you when it's dithering. Okay, but always change it back to arc seconds after you've explored the behavior of your dithering. Now, we don't need PhD2 again. Let's bring up our acquisition software. For me, it's Sequence Generator Pro. I'm going to install Nina and get familiar with it because I have a suspicion that there's so many similarities. You know, there's basic things you need to do when you are imaging. You need to set up a sequence. You need to have autofocus if you have an autofocuser. You need to be able to plate solve. You need to be able to dither. You need to be able to communicate with PhD2 from your acquisition software. You need to be able to do a frame and focus. You need to be able to cool your camera. You need to be able to move your telescope, nudge it one way and or the other. You need a histogram, and you need some kind of an environmental display that tells you if you've got a dew point that's collapsing on you and you better go out and cover up your gear or deal with it. So all of those things kind of exist in one form or fashion in all the acquisition software. It's just figuring out where it is. But in Sequence Generator Pro, how I change it is I go up to the control box or control panel. Let me get rid of the sequence panel. I go up to the control panel and I go over to Auto Guide, and I use PhD2, and so I can go here and connect to PhD2, and it will read PhD2. It actually puts up a graph down here when I'm guiding. I am not connected. My laptop's right behind me. I'm using a Mac to connect to a Windows laptop through Wi-Fi, which is how I connect remote when it's outside, but we have too many clouds, I can't image, and so I'm doing this inside. And you can select a small dither, a medium dither, and or a high dither. Now, for me, if I'm imaging with a wide field, I'm going to probably select a high dither or a medium dither. If I'm imaging with a long focal length, then I'm going to probably go with a small dither. I'm not too sure I want to move the mount too far in a more narrow field of view, just because I don't want to have any unnecessary stacking artifacts around the edges. I don't want to have to crop out my edges because of stacking I could have helped prevent. So I'm going to probably, with long focal lengths, choose a small dither, and with wider focal lengths, go a medium or a high dither. I dither between every frame, and I'm going to select, I'm going to settle at 2 pixels. If my mount is 2 pixels from where it was before the dither, stacking will fix that. So 2 pixels is a gracious plenty. You could do less, you could do more, and it dithers quicker. But I select 2 pixels, and I want to settle for 5 seconds. So this is how I'm going to set it up. I want my mount to do nothing after it is dithered for 5 seconds. I don't want to start imaging for 5 seconds. I want it to calm down, and then I want to pick up imaging. I do not want to screw up a 360-second image because I started too soon. And I've got nutsy things going on as my guide star and PhD try to get in sync, particularly on bad scene nights. And that's the other thing I want to talk with you about. There are a lot of things we're going to talk about tonight, but we want to talk about scene conditions and deep space photography. When you look at a star and scene is not good, in fact, when scene is rated as being poor, that star is twinkling and bouncing all over the place. And when you look at that star, as you look at it through PhD2, and you got your star up here, your star that's kind of centered here, and you're watching it move around. That's scene. A lot of the times, that's just scene conditions. It's not your mount. Your mount's fine. Chances are there's nothing wrong with it. But when the scene is bad, PhD is trying to center a star that's moving because of scene, not because of mount performance. And so you wonder, how in the world did I have great guiding last night? And I just covered up the mount, and I've come back out, and all I've done is uncover it, and tonight this thing's going nuts. I did something wrong. My mount is finally broke. Must be dirt that's gotten in my rig. Oh me, oh me. And so chances are, not saying that can't happen because it does, but 99.9% of the time, in my estimation, in my little world, coming to you from Spartanburg, South Carolina, in my backyard, it is scene related. And count on it. Count on bad guiding, and just plan for that. Plan on culling more subs if it's bad scene. Just plan on it. But if you can get a few in, even though the scene is bad, and you can add those to your inventory of subs on another night when the scene is better, good for you, good for me. But don't expect your mount to be able to stay pixel on pixel on a star that is bouncing all over the place because of transparency, because of moisture in the air, because of position on the horizon and all of the atmospheric turbulence between your sensor and the star. Anything you can do about it. So I don't care whether it's a Paramount, high-end observatory mount, or it's my Atlas Pro or Celestron AVX. If you've got bad scene, you're going to have bad guiding. You've got good scene, you should have good guiding in story. All right, off of that. Let's go back now to PhD. I'm sorry, it's crazy, cracking up here. Let's go back to Photoshop. I want to go back over here to Dither or not to dither. So we got dithering, kind of hopefully better understood why to dither and how important it is to minimizing noise so that you can use sparingly noise reduction software. And you'll have better signal to your noise ratio if you can eliminate it from the sensor in post-processing. So do it. Dither or die. All right, cosmetic correction. When you take your darks and or you take your subs and they're 360-second or 300-second subs, you're going to have hot pixels in all over the place. So let's take a look. Let's go to PixInsight and let's open up. Let's go to my calibration frames. I'm going to go to let's go to this drive. I'll tell you what, I should have done a little homework. I think I have some calibration. Let's go here. Yep, let's go here. Ah, crap. I may have to go to the other. Oh, here we go. Okay. 2022, I have some calibration frames. Good. I know I can change to this drive, and I've got some here too. But let's look at these. Let's see. This is the ASI 1600 camera on a wide field Stellarvue 70T triplet, and I have bias darks and flats. All right, this is good. I got some flat darks. Okay, this is the ASI 533, and I'm pretty sure it's the monochrome. I've got both cameras, the monochrome and the color camera. Oh, it is the color camera because I used flats with an L Extreme filter on it. Okay, so if I were taking subs and using the Optolong L Extreme filter, then I would use these flats, and here are my darks. So when I take darks, I spend a whole night doing it. And here's 15-second darks, and you're thinking, why would you take 15 seconds darks? Well, that's a pretty good question. Usually I take 5 and 10-second darks, but I take them. Oh, I know why. I take them because I like to shoot the stars alone, just the stars. I like to get about 30 or 40 frames, and because I was using the L Extreme filter, and it does limit light, I took longer exposures for the stars. Normally I like to take 5 and 10-second exposures for stars because I get real tight stars. I get color in them. They're not saturated. And then I remove those stars from the background. There's very little signal as a rule. There might be some if it's like Andromeda, but for the most part, there's just very little signal, so I remove the stars. And those will ultimately be the stars that I'm going to bring back into my final image. So I prepare my tight, short exposed stars separately, and I just kind of file them off to the side. And I work on my target, whether it's a galaxy or a nebula, independent of the stars. And doing that allows me to apply any noise reduction, should I do that, without impacting the stars. I'm not affecting the stars. They're not there to be impacted. So I consider that a win-win. Now, I did take some flat darks, and so by the way, these really are dark flats, not flat darks. I don't know why I call them that, but they're dark frames. They're not flat frames. These are dark frames, period. And so when you calibrate in Sequence Generator Pro, in fact, I'm going to change the name. I don't know why I called them that. I can't spell. I can't type, so I can't do. I can't do both. Dark, flats. Okay. I'm glad I found this because we're going to compare bias and dark flats in just a second. But when I take my calibration files, then I usually take the flats at night. I don't take flats in the daytime. I take flats at night, and I use a light panel. And the reason why I do is because you get leakage coming into your camera, particularly if you're using a high-speed Newtonian, and your flats are going to look Whopper John. So if you take them at night with a light panel, that is by far the best way to do that. In my opinion, the second best way to do them is to take early morning sky flats with either one layer of a t-shirt or 2 layers to dumb down the light. But at any rate, enough of that. Let's talk about dark flats. And well, before I do any of this, I want to go back into my software for acquisition. And let's get rid of control panel, and let's bring back my sequence panel. Well, pull down, please. This is a new beta version for Sequence Generator Pro. I'm trying it out, and it won't let me expand. Anyway, that's fine. I've got several events, and what I did, let's just say that I know tomorrow night's going to be cloudy, overcast, but there's no rain in the forecast. And so I can't image, or can I? Well, I can. I can take that night to build an inventory of dark frames. And assuming that tomorrow night's ambient temperature is pretty typical of any given night during a period of time, like summer. The temperature may vary 5 or 6 or 7 degrees in one way or the other, but typically summer temperatures are pretty close every night. And then during the fall, they start to cool. And during the winter, they get real cold. So I retake my calibration frames as the seasons change, and if not more often. But I do pay attention to the ambient temperature, the temperature outside. And because when you cool your temperature to, say, minus 20 or 30 degrees, that's below ambient. And so your sensor's cooling would vary if you did a minus 20 in the summer when it was 60 degrees outside at night, and you were doing minus 20 in the winter when it's 10 degrees outside. So there's a big difference in the temperature of the sensor in those two periods. So you can't necessarily just say minus 20 degree cooled darks are usable year-round. They may be usable year-round if you live in a climate that never changes, like at the equator. You'd be fine, I suppose. But at any rate, here's what I'll do. I start out with the longest exposures first. I take those first. So I'm going to take, I rarely take an image that's over 360 seconds. But when I use the one-shot color camera and I use that L Extreme, those filters that are revealing some of the hydrogen alpha and oxygen, they allow narrow band pass light to strike your sensor, and they're sophisticated and they're great, but you got to take longer exposures with those. So I'll not go over 360 seconds. So I'm going to take 20 360 second darks, and because I do have a filter wheel, and it's a 7-position filter wheel that has L, RGB, HA, S2, and O3 filters, I'll spin it till I come to the lume filter, and so it will be a lume filter. I'd rather not have any glass in front of my sensor, but I don't always get my way, and I'm not going outside to take the filter off, because I'm probably yet to take my flats, and your filters are critical to your flats because they have probably most of the dust and crap that's going to be flatted out. So I'll deal with it. But at any rate, then I take 300 seconds. After I take 20, it then takes 240, then 180, 120. And altogether, I'll have 7 hours, excuse me, of flats. The last thing I'll take will be the bias. And I'll take it at 0.003 seconds, which is the fastest exposure that I can take with the ZWO camera. I'll take 50 of them. I don't need 50 bias frames. 30 is a gracious plenty, but somehow or another I type 50 in. You just don't need them. You don't need any more than you don't want any more than you actually need. It just takes up hard drive space, and it doesn't really make an effect on your bias master. So, and And so the next morning when I wake up, I want to make sure, let's say that I was going to take 7 hours of darks. Well, there's no lag time between because there's no dithering, there's no refocusing, automatic focusing going on. So it's going to go one right after the other. So it's pretty quick between exposure times. And if I got 7 hours to do, then I'm going to start, say at 9 o'clock. I want to make sure it's pitch black dark when I start because I'm going after the longest exposures. Or maybe I'll start at 10. I'll look to see when when dark actually sets in, astronomical dark sets in. That's when I'm going to go. And then at 5 o'clock, I'm going to make sure there's no light coming up from the anticipated sunrise, where you get some light that's kind of spinning off the Earth's horizon before the sunrise. I don't want anything coming to screw up my darks, because any light getting to your dark, even though it's capped, you got a cap, your lens cap on, and you may even throw a towel over it or 2 towels over it. I think that's smart. You don't want any light getting in at all. We saw some results of that happening last night's video. So once you've got enough time, you know that you've got 7 hours and 17 minutes, then turn it loose and let it run. When you wake up the next morning, you've got your calibration frames that you can use. Should you choose to take 60-second or 90-second, or I just kind of vary it so that depending on using a filter or not, I may not use the L Extreme. I got other filters that I use that I can put on that won't restrict light like the L Extreme does, and so I may be taking fast exposures, and I'll clearly be taking 5, 10, 15, 20-second subs, so I want some corresponding darks to go with those. All right, take your calibration frames and take them right. Now let's suppose that we've taken our calibration frames, and let's go back into PixInsight. And where am I? Okay, we've got the 533 camera, and we're going to open up a dark flat. Any one of them will be fine. And then we're going to open up a bias. And we'll pick any one of those. So we have a bias, and we have a dark flat. What's the difference between the dark flat and the bias? Well, the bias was taken at 0.00 at 1/3000th of a second. And let's look at it. This is the bias, and I can refer to it right up here where we have it labeled bias, and then this is the flat dark, well, it's the dark flat at L extremes applied, and it's a 5-second flat. All right, I'm going to zoom up and to the same amount, and I don't know that if you can notice this. Let's zoom up even more and zoom up any more here. In fact, what I want to do is I want to find, let's say right there, and I'm going to drag this label from this file and drop it right on this label, and this will change. What you're seeing here is what you're seeing here. It changes this image so that this pixel right here is this pixel right here. And this pixel right here is, where is it? It isn't over here, but it happens to be there. You just don't see it. This is the bias. It's taken at 1/3000th, and this is the dark flat. Now, it's a 5-second image, and there's lines running this way. I don't know how it's showing up on YouTube. It's faint. It's only in one sub, but I see these lines, and if you stacked 20 or 30 of these dark flats together, it's going to be even more pronounced. Those lines aren't here. At 1/3000th of a second, you just see the electronic signal of the camera. Now you see all these hot pixels, but this banding, there's a little bit right there. This banding just isn't as pronounced as it is over here. So why take flat or dark flats? Man, this is going to be hard for me to explain, but I'm going to stay with it until I feel like I got it done. If, when you process an image, and I know what let's do. Let's go to PixInsight. Oh, we're on PixInsight. I'm losing my mind, guys. I'm really losing my mind. Let's minimize these real quick. We're going to open up the weighted batch processing script. I want to show you something real quick. It'll be easier to show it to you than explain how the bias frame and or the dark flats are subtracted from the flat frame to get you a calibrated flat. But let's just show you. So I'm going to bring up the weighted batch processing script, and hopefully, daggone it, I thought it would populate it with the last run. So it didn't. So let's load something. Let's go to Files. Let's pick something to set this up. And let's go to, say, December or 2002. We're not in December yet. Let's go to March. And any one of these will work. I need to have calibration files, so I need to have, so let's find a Newtonian and a 533 mono. So we want the 533. I didn't take any 533s. It's all 1600. All right, let's go here. Let's go. Didn't take many in July. We've had nothing but clouds. Here's a 533 mono on a newt. Okay. And here's the calibration 533 on a newt. So let's load the bias. We're going to load the bias. And we're going to load. I wasn't planning on doing this, but the dark, and dang it, I'm going to have to load the subs first. So I don't know what speed. So let's add the lights files. And we were in June, wasn't it? Where we had the 533 and the newt. Yep. And so let's go to our lights. They were 122nd. Okay. So we want darks that are 122nd. So we want to go to Files. And we're going to go to darks. And we need to go down. Here's 122nd darks. We want 20 of them. So now we got our darks. And we need our flats. And so we'll go back to our flats. And we had the L extreme. So this is flat blue, flat O. Wait a minute. Oh yeah, well, heck, I did monochrome. We didn't use L extreme. That's right. So what was I photographing? Was it a narrow band? I got to go back to lights. Let me just load the lights. I won't have to do this again. So let's just load our lights. I'm making this complicated much more than it needs to be. So it's in June, and it was NGC 7000. Okay, I blinked them. I thought I blinked them. I guess I didn't. All right, let's just load all of our narrowband So here's our subs, our lights. So we got our lights. We've got 45 S2, we got 45 O3, we got 50 HA. Okay, so we want to load our narrowband flats. So let's add our flats. And we want narrowband. So we're going to go to 533 flats. And we don't want loom red. We don't loom red or green. We want HA, S2, and O3. I do that every time. Get rid of that. O3. All right. So we've got our bias. We have our darks at 120 seconds. We have our flats at HA at 487, O3 at 6, and S2 at 5.58. We have our lights at 120 second. We have HA, O3, and S2. And so as we set this up, we're going to have our 120. We're going to calibrate with our flat and our dark, but you notice the bias is kind of grayed out. So let's click on the flat, and you see the bias is kind of green now. And let's go to show calibration diagram. And this is what happens. You take your flat and you subtract the bias frame from it. That's the electronic signal. You remember we talked about those horizontal lines going across that's created by the bias signal. And if you take a longer exposure, like if you're taking a dark flat, then that exposure is going to be as long as the flat. So let's say if I was taking I have to take a dark flat for my HA, that dark flat's going to be 4.87 seconds long. So the difference between your bias and your dark flats is that the exposure time. Both are covered. They say they're not temperature dependent, but I'm in the habit of taking my bias frames at the same time I'm taking my darks. And so I cool the camera for the darks. I keep it cooled for the bias. But if you're taking dark flats, then you're going to have longer exposure times that are going to match your flats. So your dark flats exposure are exactly the same as your flat exposures. So you're going to have that banding. But you're going to have the banding in your flat. So when you take a flat, the electronic signature for 4.87 is going to be in your flat. So you want to take a dark flat that's got that same signature to subtract it. And that's why they say it's so important with CMOS cameras that you use dark flats, because you've got a 4.87 second flat frame and you've got a dark electronic signature that needs to match this, so that when you subtract it, there's no signature. Your flat's pure. Your flat's without the electronic signature. And there has to be a positive difference. But honestly, I'm still shooting bias, knowing that I would probably get better signal and have a better calibrated flat if I shot dark flats. But see what you have to do? I can take 150 bias frames, and apply them to all of my flats. Or I can take dark flats for each filter. And if you do take dark flats, where do you put them? You don't put them in the bias frame. You just don't have bias. You just don't have bias. Let me close this out. No, don't want that. If you're going to take dark flats, then go up to your bias and clear them out. You don't have any. And then go to your darks and open up your I thought I took dark flats with this. I was positive I did, but I guess I didn't. Hang on a minute. Well, I saw them. I thought for sure. If you did take dark flats, then you put those in your, they'll go here. You'll have HA at 4 point some seconds. You'll have O3 at 6 point some seconds. And you'll have S2 at, that was another 4 point or 5 point something seconds. They'll match your flats, but they'll be in the dark thing. So this is where your dark flats go. And I hope that makes some sense. I've gotten rid of the bias so you see the error, but if your master flat is created by subtracting the bias, then you're still going to have some electronic signal or electronic signature, because your flat took 4.87 seconds to take. And if you use a dark flat that you take at 4.87 seconds, then the correct amount of electronic signatures are going to be removed. If it doesn't make sense, and it may not, then keep it simple. Take some dark flats and take some bias and use what works best. I have a suspicion that the dark flats will work best, but I am still using bias. So is it negligible? It must be. I can't tell the difference. Now I have 78-year-old eyes, so that may have something to do with it. All right, I'm almost done with this, but I do want to show you cosmetic correction and why it's so important to have cosmetic correction applied. I'm going to bring up a dark that's a 360-second dark. It doesn't matter. Here's those dark flats. But that's for the 533 one-shot color camera with the L Extreme. That's why I didn't see them. Okay. Let's bring up a dark, and let's go down and get a 360-second dark. Now here's a 500-second dark. Let's open this up. And let's stretch this. And I'll tell you one thing about this 533 camera. It is clean. Gracious, is clean. There's no amp glow. Let me go back here and open up just to show you what I'm talking about. I love the 533 mono, and I love the 533 one-shot color. It is so underrated. I just love it. All right, let's see what we have here. This is the 1600. Let's go to the longest exposure that I have, which is probably 300 seconds. Here's 360-second exposure. And let me bring up, this is the ASI 1600, and I'm going to have amp glow right here and right here. And I've got hot pixels. It's pretty clean. This is the Pro, the 1600 Pro. All right. Now, why in the world do you run cosmetic correction, and what is it? Cosmetic correction is going to do one thing. It's going to move these hot pixels. You don't need them. You don't want them. They're not stars. it's it's crap. It's electronic crap. So you want to remove them if you can. Now I've got the script located on my. I've got it located right here as a process. But all you do is go to process icons, and go down to cosmetic correction. Where are you? There it is. And I think the default has a check under auto detect. That's what you want. And you want hot sigma checked. And start out with, depending on your camera and the sensor, start out with 3 pixels. And I'm going to open up the real-time preview so you can kind of see this, and I'll toggle back and forth. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. Look at some of the hot pixels. I hope it shows up, and I'm going to go up here and toggle back and forth. Not applied, applied, not applied, applied. Let me get a, I'm going to go out and let's try this one. This has got more. All right, it's applied, and now it's not applied. Applied, not applied. Still not a real good one to look at. Let's just run it, and then we can zoom in. So we're going to add some files. And let's go to, what camera do we want to use? Let's use the Vixen and the 183 because we have amp glow. We have all the crap in the world on that camera. All right, let's go down to the 300 sec. Let's try one picture. It's going to be number 17 at 300 seconds. So we got number 17 at 300. Let's pick an output directory. And let's just make that, let's just put it here. And we're going to call this CC, be easy to find. All right, that's the output directory. And let's run it. We're going to run it on one image. Okay, let's bring up that image, but let's go back and let's go down to dark. And let's bring up number 17 without cosmetic correction and stretch that. And see the amp glow with that camera. And then let's open up the I forgot where I put it now. Oh, horse crap. Didn't we create where did we put it? I thought we created a where was the app? Was it over here on this drive? No, I'm losing it, y'all. Where's CC drive? Absolutely. That's nuts. I gotta do this again. All right. Let's get our cosmetic correction, and let me look and see where volume Astro 4 2022 CC Astro 4. Why did I? Okay, well I know where it is. So let's go to open. I'm in another drive altogether. Astro 4 and 2022 CC. There it is. Where'd that come from? Okay. This is number 17 with cosmetic correction applied, and this is number 1770T360. Oh, sugar burger. This is the 183 at 300 seconds, number 17. And this is the 1600. I've got even the wrong. I got two different cameras I'm comparing. At any rate, this is cosmetic correction because of the CC. So let me go bring up the 183. I think that's in a different drive. So let me see if I can find that. That's M106. All right, let's go. Open. I may just leave you guys. I'm cracking up here. All right, where was I have no idea what month I was in. Let's go June. Oh no, let's see. No, it was in. Oh, wrong drive. So 2. All right, June. M106. You know what? It'll just be awful easier. Just, I know what I'm going to do. Delete. We're going to pull up. Why didn't I do this the first time? I'm losing my mind. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to bring up the 533. We're going to bring up this dark from Astro 4. And we're going to bring up the first one at 300 seconds. Number 1 at 300 seconds. All right, we're going to make a clone of it. Why didn't I do that the first time? Instead of go look for it. All right. Now, that's going to be called clone. So what we're going to do is we're going to clear, and I think I can just drag this in here. Please tell me I can. Well, we're going to add it. And Astro 4, dark, .300 seconds, number 1. Okay, do we have the same? Yes, we got the 533 mm, 533 mm. We have the newt. We've got 300 seconds, 300 seconds. It's the number 1. It's the number 1. It's in there. So we're going to click an output directory. We'll just keep that output directory, and we're going to execute. And then we're going to delete this one. All right, we don't need this one anymore. So it goes up here. And we don't need this anymore. So now let's go bring up cosmetic correction. I told you I was going to land on my feet and probably end up with egg on my face. All right, we got to go to 2022 CC. There should be 2 files. We want the 533 with the newt, the number 1. It's got cosmetic correction. You see the CC. Okay, now we've got one with cosmetic correction and we've got one without. So let's stretch them both. And let's zoom. This is with it. And let's come over here and all right. Now, this is the exact same place as this. This has so many more hot pixels than this does. I hope you can see that. This has Cosmetic Correction ran. This is the #1 frame. It's a 300-second 533 mono, and this is the Newtonian 533 mono, 300 seconds, the #1 frame, the same exact one. I'm going to zoom up even more, and I'm going to drag this on top, and it's going to create the same equivalent image. See this pixel right here? That's this one. See these here? They're not there. See all this right here? Some of them are here, but not all of them. And so what I might do is look at one image before I run the weighted batch processing script. I hope you stuck with me on this so that you can see what I'm doing. And let's bring up Cosmetic Correction again, and I may then run this up to 4 or 5 and see if I can remove a few more of these pixels without creating some unnecessary artifacts. You can reach a point where nothing happens. It doesn't make a change one way or the other. You can't get rid of them, but you can get rid of a lot of them. And so this is all about improving signal to noise. And if you can get rid of this background noise by dithering, if you can get rid of some of these hot pixels by running the Cosmetic Correction script, run it. Dither or die, run Cosmetic Correction or perish. My new mantra. All right, how do you do it? Well, if you're running PixInsight, you're going to go to the weighted batch process. Well, you can do it with this. You don't have to run the weighted batch processing script. You can just add all your subs right there, and then you can run it. But what I would do is, I'll go to script, weighted batch processing script, and it's going to load the last one we ran, so we don't have to enter anything, absent the bias frames. And so click on your lights, go over here and click on your lights, and it says Cosmetic Correction. Now, in order to run it, you've got to have this on your desktop. So I have it already on my desktop, and so it's called CC, and it's my template. So crap, I'm going to exit. I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to say, okay, I want to create a Cosmetic Correction template, and I want to save it. So every time I run the weighted batch processing script, I got it. So I'm going to go to Process, All Processes, Processes, Cosmetic Correction, and I'm going to call this, I'm going to save it. I'm going to make sure I don't want it on 4, I want it on 3. It picks up what you left it at last time. And I'm going to drag this icon to my desktop and create a new process. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to entitle this to CC. Well, let's just call it, so you'll see what I'm doing, CC. Cosmetic Correction, Cosmetic Correction. So here's my new process icon. Now I'm going back to the script, batch processing, weighted batch processing. God love you guys who are staying with me on this. And so we're going to go to our lights, and I've got to add the template, and so I'm going to pull down, and there it is, CCC. It's going to pull this up. I want to apply to all frames. I'm going to click on this, apply to all frames. I'm going to go to, I don't think you have to do this, but I do. So I'm going to apply the Cosmetic Correction to all of my lights. Bingo. And that's that. Folks, I've worn you out. I've worn me out. And logic tells me, and better sense tells me, I need to script some of this stuff so that I don't ramble for an hour and a half. But hopefully this will make some sense. I hope everybody has a great rest of the evening or great rest of the week. And I'm going to sign off for now and wish you guys just a good day. If you don't mind, if you like what you saw, then you're nuts. And if you're nuts, then go ahead and subscribe, and you'll see some more, probably no better, can't be any worse videos. So subscribe, and you'll see more of the same. And that's the way it is, guys.